floors collapsed down.
It was in an explosion. It was in the lobby, and the third explosion, the whole lobby collapsed on us.
What was it like? What was it like?
Horrible, horrible. The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was. It was like 3 explosions after that. We came in after the fire. We came when the fire was going on already. We was in the staging area inside the building, waiting to go upstairs. Then it exploded. Then the whole lobby collapsed on the lobby inside.
When the first of the towers actually started falling down, I just said, this can't happen. It can't happen. And then the other tower came down, and I said, this violates the laws of physics. It can't happen. Those aircraft and those fires could not cause those buildings to come down in that way.
I am the highest-ranking officer, I believe, that has ever gone public. That whatever that story was, the official story, was not true. When you look at the tower coming down, what you see are, at each floor, successive puffs of smoke. Puff, 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 all the way down. What are the puffs of smoke coming from? Well, they claim they're from the collapsing floors. No, no, no. Those puffs of smoke are controlled demolition. That's exactly what they are, because that's exactly how they work.
The most obvious hypothesis for anyone looking at the films, and that was a lot of people, is that the buildings came down because there was very carefully controlled demolition with high explosives that had been planted many weeks, if not months, before.
Couldn't be nothing no more worse than this. You're in the building trying to help people, and it's exploding on you inside the building. So I don't think it could get any worse than this.
Looking anew at 9/11 is a lot like watching a great movie that at the end you find out a detail that transforms the whole experience of the movie. That the characters, the scenes, all have a different meaning that need to be reprocessed. Sometimes we go to see the movie again to understand what was actually happening that we didn't the first time. Reprocessing 9/11 will inevitably stir up new hurts. We've already been through the trauma, but now realizing that there's a different meaning cuts in a different way. And we have to be willing to endure those pains, those hurts, and those fears that are required there. And in some way, we have to relive 9/11 anew.
I think we can all relate to the initial shock and awe of the planes approaching the World Trade Center, going into them. We were terrified. We thought the country was under attack. And then we were given an explanation within 24 to 48 hours that this was forces from the Mideast, 19 Arabs. And that flashbulb memory, that traumatic event has stayed with us ever since. It's been called shock and awe in another context with Iraq. But there was a shock and awe, definitely, in that case. And the media theory says that the first story is the one that sticks with you.
September 11, the world experienced a shock, and especially the American people. And then we got disoriented in a state of what is called cognitive dissonance, where we had two different ideas that did not go together. For example, in America, we thought we were safe, and yet now we were not. where were those military airplanes that are supposed to protect us? We saw the airplanes flying into the towers and then the towers collapsing. The explanation was somewhere it was a structural failure. Then later on, we heard from architects and engineers that it was not possible. It did not follow the principle of physical laws.
People continue to be either oblivious to the fact that this information exists or completely resistant to looking at this information. So the question becomes why? Why is it that people have so much trouble hearing this information? Now, as we know, the horrors of what happened on 9/11 were televised all over the world, and they were televised, in fact, live, so that millions of people witnessed that, and millions of Americans witnessed what was happening. We witnessed the deaths of almost 3,000 of our fellow Americans. We know this had a very severe and traumatic impact on a majority of the population. I myself cried for weeks after September 11th. So I think it's safe to say that collectively as a nation, because of what happened on September 11th, we experienced trauma. Specifically, if we thought the world was a safe place after we've experienced or witnessed a trauma, we often think the world is not a very safe place anymore. And so it very much changes our beliefs about the world. It changes our ability to trust other people and to trust other entities.
Many people have rightly commented that 9/11 is a religious issue. As a theologian, I agree with that. I accept the definition of religion given by Paul Tillich many years ago, saying that religion deals with matters of ultimate concern. Now, theologian John Cobb has stated that starting in the 15th and 16th century, we had a major shift in the understanding of religious concern. That prior to that time, people were Christians or Jews or some other religion, and that was their primary identity. That was their ultimate concern. But it shifted in the 15th century to nationalism. And nationalism in various countries became the new religion. This is certainly true in the United States, where Americanism trumps Christianity for many Christians. I gave a lecture a few years ago called 9/11 and Nationalist Faith. And in that, I argued that even though people who are Christians or Jews, and then if they're Christians, some particular type of Christianity, like the Presbyterian Church or the Methodist Church or the Catholic Church, they actually tend to subordinate that to their concern for America, for their devotion to America. I was interviewed by one of the well-known talk show hosts on television, and they came to the home and interviewed me, and it was going very well from my point of view, but the talk show hosts got very upset and finally just blurted out, "That's blasphemy."
It is wrong, blasphemous, and sinful for you to suggest, imply, or help other people come to the conclusion that the U.S. government killed 3,000 of its own citizens because...
And blasphemy is a religious issue. And he was treating Bush and Cheney as if they were religious figures, as if, frankly, they were members of the Holy Trinity. And so that was another great revelation to me, that for many people, their devotion to the country or even the political representatives of the country are more important and of religious importance than claims about what really happened on 9/11. So I think people need to think seriously through their own religious commitment, whether they're Christians or Jews or Muslims or Hindus or Buddhists. Think about what it is they are truly most ultimately concerned about. And if that is God, then they would say, truth is the most important thing. So I need to be open to the possible truth of the 9/11 truth movement, even if that is very threatening to me and to my commitment to my nation.
A lens through which to understand the resistance that we all have against hearing information that contradicts our worldview or information about the official story of 9/11 is what social psychologists call cognitive dissonance. For example, with 9/11, we have one cognition, which is the official story of 9/11, what our government told us, what our media repeated to us over and over, that 19 Muslims attacked us. On the other hand, we have what scientists, researchers, architects, engineers are now beginning to tell us, which is that there is evidence that shows that the official story cannot be true, that 9/11 was most likely a false flag operation. So now we've lost our sense of security. We are starting to feel vulnerable. Now we're confused. Now we have a choice, and we all have this choice. And what some of us will tend to do is deny the evidence that's coming our way and stick to the original story, the official story, and to try to regain our equilibrium in that way. Another thing we can do is decide to look at the conflicting evidence and be sincere and be open-minded and look at both sides of the issue and then make up our own mind about what reality is.
One thing I would like people to know is that you don't need to be an engineer or an architect to see what happened to those buildings. I'm asked all the time, why should we not believe the experts and what they've told us? And I always answer with this simple story. One day when I was driving my truck down the road, my truck quit suddenly. And as I was waiting for the tow truck to come, I thought to myself, well, don't just sit here like a stool pigeon. Get out of your truck, open the hood, and look underneath the hood for anything that's obviously broken. And I did that, and I checked everything. I checked the oil, I checked the oil temperature, I looked for, fan belt broken, anything, obvious things. Nothing was wrong. But when the mechanic called me and told me that I needed a new engine because it had overheated, and because it had dropped its oil and overheated, I knew he was lying. Because I had opened the hood and looked for myself and thought for myself. And it turned out it was just a cam sensor, and I was able to fix it myself. I was able to get the part on eBay and stick it on and watch a YouTube on how to fix it and stick it on and drive away. But the comparison is this. Unless you're willing, we all have to be willing to look at the videos of the buildings coming down. You have to be willing to look for the obvious evidence. The symmetry is the smoking gun. Those buildings could not have fallen in perfectly level. It's as if you take a level with a bubble in the center and watch those buildings come down, and that bubble will stay centered the whole way down. And that cannot happen with an airplane hitting one side of the building. It cannot happen that when you have asymmetric damage, you will get a perfectly symmetrical collapse. And all you need to do is look at the videos and see that. Then you have to be willing to trust what you saw and call out the lie.
This is an orange. If you were told it was something else, you wouldn't believe it, would you? This is called visual identification based on experience. This building is about to be destroyed in what is called a controlled demolition. Buildings do not do this spontaneously. Successful demolitions require that all structural support columns collapse at virtually the same time. If they don't, or if something else goes wrong, the result will look something like this. This is World Trade Center 7 just before it collapsed on September the 11th, 2001. It had not been hit by an aircraft. It had been damaged by falling debris and minor fires. But by 5:20 p.m. the fires were still not a threat. Although the building was 47 stories high, it doesn't fall sideways, nor collapse unevenly. For this to have happened, all of the building's vertical supports must have given way at almost exactly the same time. Yet the Federal Emergency Management Agency reported that the collapse was due primarily to fire. But what does it look like to you? The National Institute of Standards and Technology still rules out a controlled demolition.
Some 3,000 members of the families who were lost on 9/11 have been trying for years to get justice through our system for the losses that they have suffered. At virtually every step of the judicial process, when the United States government was called upon to take a position, it has been a position adverse to the interest of the United States citizens seeking justice. This is a very important issue. It may seem stale to some, but it is as current as the headlines that we will read today. It is an issue that goes to the core of the United States contract with its people, that it is highly improbable that the 19 people could have acted alone. Yet the official position of the United States government has been that they did act alone, and that there is no necessity for further inquiry into the question of whether there was a support network. President Lincoln had a policy throughout the war that every message that came into the government, specifically into the State Department, was a matter of public record on a daily basis. His feeling was that if the support of the American people were going to be maintained in a war which was increasingly bloody, many loss of lives and loss of treasure, that it took the confidence of the American people that their government was conducting itself in an appropriate manner, and that the key to that confidence was disclosure. I wish we applied the Lincoln-esque standard to what happened in 9/11.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires. Alternative theories are really, none of them have been found to be credible in terms of why these buildings collapsed.
Neither NIST or FEMA followed standard protocol for fire and explosion investigations, or just fire investigations for that matter. National Fire Protection Association Guide number 921 calls for saving the evidence and being prepared to justify why you wouldn't. It also calls for testing for accelerants and explosives when high-order damage is involved. NIST did not do this.
In an office fire, you cannot generate enough heat to melt steel. And yet we have evidence of molten iron in the microspheres, in the rubble pile, and the metal pouring out of the side of the tower.
We have found no evidence of that would suggest any kind of an explosive material that caused the buildings to collapse.
I'm wondering, did you do any explosive residue testing on any item out of the building just to lay these ideas to rest?
Answer to that is no. We did not do it.
So the preconceived notion of NIST is that there's no evidence for explosives, and so there's no point in looking. That is the most unscientific thing that you can possibly think of, not to look because you don't expect to find evidence. And in fact, the evidence is overwhelming. I claim they're not doing science at all. They're doing propaganda or publicity or whatever they're doing, but it's not science. It's not playing by the rules of science.
The 9/11 attacks were carried out by something other than the hijackers, and there's a whole alternative universe in which the attacks occurred in a completely different way. Yeah, if we lived in a parallel universe, that would be a very different universe. There's, in our view, not a lot of evidence that that universe is actually connected to this one. No, there are actually about 2,000 allegations of this kind, of which we saw a lot, and we didn't try to knock down every. We took on a few of the most important ones in the report, but there are so many incredible allegations of this kind that we did not. It would have taken us hundreds of pages in the report, which is already a pretty long report, to say, and here's why that's bogus, here's why that's bogus, here's why that's bogus, and we could have gone on like that for a long time. But we didn't do that because then what would have happened is you couldn't have sustained the narrative and the kind of report we wanted to provide. But we don't actually believe that there is the kind of controlled demolition scenario that you hypothesize. We don't find any persuasive affirmative evidence that that scenario actually is true.
6.5 seconds it dropped in 6.5 seconds. How do you account for that when it wasn't hit by a plane?
It is absolutely obvious to me that we've been lied to, that the government's official story as put forward by the Bush administration and their 9/11 commission run by Zelikow, a White House flack, and NIST, the whole stuff is garbage from one end to the other. It is physically impossible.
So the question is, do you believe what you can see with your own eyes, or do you believe what you are told?
People differ in their ability to question authority. Stanley Milgram did a famous psychological experiment about 50 years ago, and in this experiment, 65% of subjects administered the final massive 450-volt shock to a participant that they believed had a heart condition who was screaming and pounding on the wall.
375 volts.
Now, they've done a number of replications of this study and have found that 61 to 66% of people were prepared to inflict what they believed was a fatal shock at the bidding of an authority figure. So roughly 2/3 of the public can show blind obedience to authority.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas.
I can't honestly say that I've ever been completely relieved of the fact that there might have been international connections.
You mean you still feel that there might have been?
Well, I have not completely discounted.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order. What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order. Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
What happened in 9/11 is we didn't have a strategy, we didn't have bipartisan agreement, we didn't have American understanding of it, and we had instead a policy coup in this country. A coup, a policy coup. Some hard-nosed people took over the direction of American policy, and they never bothered to inform the rest of us. I went downstairs, I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know. He said, I said, well, did they tie Saddam to 9/11? He said, no. He said, but I guess they don't know what to do about terrorism, and so they think, but they can attack states, and they want to look strong, and so I guess they think if they take down a state, it will intimidate the terrorists. And, you know, it's like that old saying, he said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem has to be a nail. And then I came back to the Pentagon about 6 weeks later. I saw the same officer. I said, why haven't we attacked Iraq? We still going to attack Iraq? He said, oh, sir, he says, it's worse than that. He said, he pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office that says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. Now, did anybody ever tell you that? Was there a national dialogue on this? Did senators and congressmen stand up and denounce this plan? Was there a full-fledged American debate on it? Absolutely not. And there still isn't. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld, and you could name a half-dozen other collaborators from the Project for a New American Century. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control.
They told us why they had to do it. They said, we need to occupy Iraq permanently in order to dominate Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and the southern Russian republics around the Caspian Sea. We need to control the entire Middle East and all its oil. This war in Iraq has nothing to do with national security or freedom or democracy or human rights or protecting our allies or weapons of mass destruction or defeating terrorism or disarming Iraq. It has to do with money, it has to do with oil, and it has to do with raw imperial power.
What I found to be very helpful in understanding our current situation are names. Names can help us get our mind around certain concepts. For example, the term false flag operation. A false flag operation is usually a violent act perpetrated by one's own government or group and scapegoating another group of people for the purpose of convincing the population to go to war abroad and to restrict liberties at home. When we do some research into false flag operations, we find that they are probably government's most dependable way of getting support for war.
In naval warfare, a false flag refers to an attack where a vessel flies a flag other than their true battle flag before engaging their enemy. It is a trick designed to deceive the enemy about the true nature and origin of an attack. In the democratic era, where governments require at least a plausible pretext before sending their nation to war, it has been adapted as a psychological warfare tactic to deceive a government's own population into believing that an enemy nation has attacked them. In 1931, Japan was looking for a pretext to invade Manchuria. On September 18th of that year, a lieutenant in the Imperial Japanese Army detonated a small amount of TNT along a Japanese-owned railway in the Manchurian city of Mukden. The act was blamed on Chinese dissidents and used to justify the occupation of Manchuria just 6 months later. When the deception was later exposed, Japan was diplomatically shunned and forced to withdraw from the League of Nations. In 1962, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff authored a document called Operation Northwoods, calling for the U.S. government to stage a series of fake attacks, including the shooting down of military or civilian U.S. aircraft, the destruction of a U.S. ship, sniper attacks in Washington, and other atrocities, to blame on the Cubans as an excuse for launching an invasion. In August 1964, the USS Maddox, a U.S. destroyer on patrol in the Gulf of Tonkin, believed it had come under attack from North Vietnamese Navy torpedo boats, engaging in invasive action and returning fire. The incident led to the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, authorizing President Johnson to begin open warfare in Vietnam. It was later admitted that no attack had occurred, and in 2005 it was revealed that the NSA had manipulated their information to make it look like an attack had taken place.
Johnson said, "We may have to escalate. I'm not going to do it without congressional authority." And he put forward a resolution, the language of which gave complete authority to the president to take the nation to war. The Tonkin Gulf Resolution. And events afterwards showed that our judgment that we'd been attacked that day was wrong. It didn't happen.
In 2001, attacks in New York and Washington were blamed on al-Qaeda as a pretext for invading Afghanistan. These are but a few of the hundreds of such incidents that have been staged over the centuries to blame political enemies for attacks that they did not commit. The tactic remains in common use today, and will continue to be employed as long as populations still blindly believe whatever their governments tell them about the origins of spectacular terror incidents.
We're also very fortunate to have the term deep state. This term was coined by Professor Peter Dale Scott.
The public state is the one we're taught about in school, and it's true as far as it goes, but all over the world, particularly since World War II, but even before, public states have little escape hatches for when they want to do something illegal. And in this country, the most visible, but not the only sign of it, is the CIA, which was actually charged quite early on in 1948 to start committing crimes against governments in other parts of the world. So we do have a deep state in America, and the thesis of my book is it's secret, it's not properly controlled, it gets involved in larger and larger enterprises, which were never envisaged, by the way, when the CIA was first created, which become more and more disastrous for everybody, including the United States. And the balance between the public state and the deep state has been shifting more and more towards the deep state because there are checks and balances on the public state and nothing that works by way of checks and balances with the CIA and DIA and the Drug Enforcement Administration, the various components of the deep state.
And we have more recently been given another phrase, state crimes against democracy, or SCADS, S-C-A-D-S. The social scientist, through the very prominent and well-regarded journal, the American Behavioral Scientist, devoted their entire February 2010 issue to this study of state crimes against democracy. What these social scientists are telling us is that they are seeing patterns. They are seeing patterns for many state crimes against democracy. They have looked at the John F. Kennedy assassination, the Martin Luther King assassination, the Bobby Kennedy assassination, the Iran-Contra conspiracy, the Watergate conspiracy. And what they're seeing is that there are patterns, and they're telling us that as social scientists, they need to study these patterns, how these events took place, who benefited from them.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
What were the resulting policy changes? They need to study these criminal patterns by the deep state, just as they would study any other social issue.
Numerous false flag events have been used to justify wars in the past. Possibly the Iraq and Afghanistan wars can be connected to a false flag event in this case. That would fit into the psychologist's explanation. Somebody generated a new Pearl Harbor, and that was used to turn public opinion into the support of war.
A number of senior congressional figures are calling this America's Pearl Harbor.
Is this comparable to an attack on Pearl Harbor?
This is an act of war. When they compare this to Pearl Harbor, I don't think they're wrong.
Senator Dodd earlier today compared this to the equivalent of the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
In my youth, the Gulf of Tonkin has been exposed as the false flag non-incident, which was used to get Congress to vote to go into Vietnam. If you look into the history of other wars, in almost every case, you find public opinion was manipulated to get us into the war, and this may be no exception. So rather than be afraid of the possibility that we were manipulated into a perception that we'd been attacked, perhaps we should summon the courage to allow experts to weigh in and have a public process to get out the truth. So that's why I have joined the 9/11 Truth Movement, to allow the light of day to shine on a traumatic event and hope that out of that can come a national healing.
When I was first presented with the idea that 9/11 was an inside job, that 9/11 was a false flag operation, I said, well, give me the evidence. So he sent me some evidence, some websites. I looked at them and didn't find the evidence convincing. So I went back to the work I was doing. 6 months later, somebody else sent me information. So I looked at it, and this time it clicked. I saw stories that were in the mainstream press. New York Times, nothing in the left-wing press, nothing unusual, only mainstream press stories. And yet I saw there were dozens, even hundreds of such stories that conflicted with some aspect of the official story about 9/11. Now, I've written about there are different types of people. You have empirical people who will simply say, look at the evidence, and if it's convincing, I will change my mind. Other people are paradigmatic people. They have a paradigm. They say, this is the way the world works, and I'm convinced this is the right way the world works. 9/11 doesn't fit into that paradigm. So I don't need to look at the evidence. It's paradigmatic. And then there is a third type of person that we often call wishful thinkers. I call it wishful and fearful thinking. So they simply will not believe something that they fear to be the truth. And I found that maybe to be the most powerful factor of people rejecting the 9/11 truth and not even entertaining the evidence. I had one woman, after I presented what I thought was a very convincing lecture, she came up to me and she said, I simply refuse to believe what you've said because I do not want to live in a country where the leaders would do such a thing. That is fearful thinking with a vengeance. And it's very common. So, and that fits into this nationalism. This is the fear that the country that I thought we had, this country that's better than other countries, you're telling me that's not true. That is frightening. I simply refuse to believe it. I will not listen to any more evidence, whatever it is.
Now, I've noticed as I've spoken with people about 9/11 that I get some very interesting, spontaneous reactions from people. I believe that every one of us will be able to relate to these reactions because most of us bought the official story about what happened on 9/11 completely, and then we were shocked when we discovered evidence to the contrary. Fran, I refuse to believe that many Americans could be that satanically treasonous. Someone would have talked. Now, this reaction is very interesting because it contains two assumptions. Number one, that if 9/11 is a false flag operation orchestrated by elements within our government, that it would have required a large number of people to have pulled it off. The second assumption is that somebody would have had a conscience and would have talked. But these are beliefs. They are not scientific facts. But these beliefs do keep us from looking at the empirical evidence. Whenever we say, I refuse to believe, we can be sure that the evidence that's coming our way is not bearable and that it's conflicting with our worldview much too much. Another reaction, Fran, you can't expect someone to let in information that turns their world upside down. If this were true, up would be down and down would be up. My life would never be the same. Another said, have you lost friends talking about this issue? And by the way, that's a very important statement. I think that is at bottom what most of us fear, is being ostracized. And by the way, the answer to this is, no, I have not lost any real friends, but I have had very good friendships severely strained. And that's the nature of this subject. When we introduce an idea that is paradigm shifting to a person, this is to be expected. Here are some very honest responses that I've heard. I must admit that I seriously resist anyone messing with my worldview. I wouldn't want to live in a world where such a thing could be true. And finally, here's the most honest response I have ever received. If what you're saying is true, I don't want to know, because I would become very negative. My life would go downhill. I'd take a turn for the worse. So as I thought about all of these responses, I realized that what is common to every one of them is the emotion of fear. People are afraid of being ostracized, they're afraid of being alienated, they're afraid of being shunned, they're afraid of their lives being inconvenienced, they'd have to change their lives, they're afraid of being confused, they're afraid of psychological deterioration, they're afraid of feeling helpless and vulnerable. And they're afraid that they won't be able to handle the feelings that are coming up. So really fear is at the bottom of each of these feelings. And when we feel vulnerable and helpless, it's a very terrible feeling. None of us want to feel helpless and vulnerable. So we want to defend ourselves. And the way we often do that is with anger. So then we become angry. And when we become angry, then we become indignant. We become offended. We want to ridicule the messenger. We want to pathologize the messenger. And we want to censor the messenger.
On the day of 9/11, I saw the second plane crash into the South Tower. I got to the TV just in time to witness that. And then later in the day, I was standing alone in my kitchen and was suddenly hit with what I think of now as Jewish paralysis. As a person of Jewish heritage, I suddenly got the extremely frightening sense that this was a very coordinated attack by the Arab world on the Jewish people. And there was no particularly rational reason for me to be thinking that. I just remember that I felt that very strongly on that day. After 9/11, we seemed to talk about nothing else at our office and with my friends. And I remember in a reevaluation counseling session just crying my heart out as I thought about the children who were orphaned on that day and thinking about the people who were forced to jump out of the towers and, you know, the terror they must have felt. And I couldn't get my head around how people could have been so mean, so hostile to do that, knowing how it would affect people.
What's critical here is that acts of terrorism and political terrorism are also considered traumatic events. And there's what's different about trauma versus daily stress or situational stress are a few things. First of all, there is a perceived or real threat to bodily harm or life. There's also a feeling of being completely helpless and overwhelmed by a force beyond the individual's control. Another characteristic is that resistance or escape is not possible. So these are the characteristics of traumatic stress. Now, what's very interesting about that is about trauma is that actually witnessing a traumatic event can have the same psychological impact as actually being in the event.
Well, fear is kind of the beginning of everything. Goering at Nuremberg gave an interview off the record, and somebody, a bright journalist, just said, how on earth did you pull it off, you Nazis, to get the Germans, who were a civilized people for several hundred years, to turn into the bloody Huns and go to war, create concentration camps? And Goering said, well, no sensible man is ever going to join your army and risk getting killed unless there's a strong reason. And that's fear. And we knew how to create it. The Bolsheviks are coming, or whichever enemy of the week it was. The Poles are coming, the Czechs are killing the Sudeten Germans, and they'll try and kill you too. Well, just look what's been done now in the name of freedom and liberty. The fear is constant, and it's just, for instance, every child of 9 outside the United States knows that
Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with al-Qaeda and nothing to do with Osama bin Laden. As a matter of fact, the two men despised each other. Every day for months, one day it would be the vice president, the next day it would be the president. We got to take care of evil all over the world, bring them back dead or alive. Now, if the people hear that from what they assume is their president, elected president, they're bound to believe it's bound to, there's some residue that stays in people's heads. They can't keep lying all that much.
And so with terror, they have been able to come up with the USA Patriot Act, which nobody seems to be able to get their hands on. I can't find it, which shreds our civil liberties. And we're now at war with just about everybody. We're talking about possible strikes against Iran, North Korea, Syria. We have gone barbarous. We have gone back 2,000 to 3,000 years in human history to almost pre-Roman times. And the rationale among themselves is we got to have that oil. Well, the money we spend on a war, we could develop an alternative to fossil fuels. It's not all that, it's not that far away in the future. But we don't. We prefer the wars.
I think as a psychologist, to overcome our fear of the traumatic event with new information would be the best, healthiest route to our collective recovery from the trauma of 9/11. That, by the way, is a psychotherapeutic insight that to gradually uncover the truth in your own life, the sources of anxiety, to make them conscious, is the royal road to recovery. Healing comes through facing the truth, experiencing it, allowing the feelings to come in, so that if there are feelings of fear that perhaps these events were caused by something that we haven't thought about yet, dark elements within our society, for example, we'll let that come in and explore it. Let the light shine on whatever happened. This will be the most healing process. The Germans did this after their war. The South Africans did this after apartheid. Reconciliation through the truth is what is a deep path to psychological recovery from the myths and lies around which this historic event has been cloaked in the official view. But some of us find it comforting if we believe that an enemy attacked us. Most people take that route. That explanation was given to us by the news media within hours of the so-called attack. That's extraordinary, to identify the perpetrators on the first day without any forensic examination, without any investigation of the crime scene. For example, there was another World Trade Tower that went down, World Trade Center 7, and no one's explaining that. So we waited and we got the 9/11 Commission report. We thought that would bring some harmony, some consonance, but for us there was dissonance. The official story didn't make enough sense. We had this discrepant information. We kept looking, and finally we found something that did produce consonance, which was that there was apparently a demolition in all three buildings, and that's where the Richard Gage explanation appeals to a wide spectrum of professionals in many disciplines. So the dissonance is reduced by finding a scientific explanation. And most people find comfort in believing that we were attacked. A smaller minority of us feel that it would be more comforting to understand this in terms of science.
The thing that's most important about science is that it's a way of knowing. It's a way of knowing that anyone can participate in. Of course, they have to have some background and they always develop more. But it's a way of knowing about anything. And it's at the end of any kind of science activity, people will agree that they have collected evidence that illustrates a hypothesis. And if the evidence is contradictory to the hypothesis, one has to abandon that hypothesis and look for another one. And one must in testing any hypothesis or trying to establish it, consider all of the relevant evidence, which may come from all kinds of places, observations, measurements, and so on. And insofar as people can be objective at all, they will come to the same sorts of conclusions. So science is a fundamentally useful and accurate and universal way of finding out about the world.
NIST received $20 million of taxpayers' money to determine why and how World Trade Center 1 and World Trade Center 2 collapsed following the initial impacts of the aircraft, and to this day they have not done so. This is why Architects and Engineers has kept pressing NIST, asking them to publish their data in regards to the potential energy released during the downwards movement of the upper stories and the absorptive capacity of the intact structure below the collapsed zone.
Structural engineers do this every day. This is not rocket science. You have the known weight of this building mass. You have what are known columns below it in order to resist it. You let it go in your models and you calculate what the resistance is. Why didn't they do it? Could it be because they knew darn well that it would not have collapsed at all?
In fact, it could be suggested that NIST never explained the collapses by gravity alone because it would be impossible to do so without violating at least two of the most fundamental laws of physics. One is Newton's third law of motion, which states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This means that two opposing forces will neutralize each other. In a head-on collision, the two cars absorb each other's kinetic energy and transform it into physical deformation or damage. After that, the system comes to a rest, as there is no more energy to be dissipated.
The top section, pushing on the bottom section, it's going to meet equal forces as it goes. Both sections are going to be demolished at the same rate. So by the time you've crushed up 15 stories below it, the top 15 stories are also going to be crushed. And so there's nothing left now to crush the rest of the building.
Something of this kind is what we should have seen when the top section of the towers collapsed onto the lower one. The upper and lower sections should have mutually destroyed each other until all the energy is dissipated and the system comes to a rest. Alternatively, as shown in this experiment with two towers made of snow, the top section could have fallen off to the side after the initial collapse. What could not have happened is this.
A little tiny chunk of the building can't possibly fall and crush the entire structure below it.
This is such a simple, fundamental concept that architects and engineers were astonished in seeing it totally ignored by NIST.
This is high school physics. And our whole society is being led to believe that these fundamental laws of physics, hard science, don't apply anymore.
But even if we assume that the top section of the tower had enough potential energy to destroy the rest of the structure below, it could not have done so at the speed it did, which was near freefall speed. That would have violated an even more important principle in physics, known as the law of momentum conservation. This law states that the total energy within an isolated system must always remain the same. As we have seen, the energy can be transformed within the system, from motion to physical deformation. But for the deformation to begin, the velocity must decrease in order for one kind of energy to be transformed into the other. No new energy can be added to the system. One particular example of momentum conservation is freefall. Freefall happens when the only force applied on an object is gravity. This means that all the potential energy contained by the object is converted into vertical motion. As soon as the falling object hits an obstacle and breakage occurs, the speed must decrease because some of its energy needs now to be converted into physical breakage. It takes energy to break things apart, and that energy must come from within the system. Thus, the falling rock cannot keep falling at free fall speed and break apart at the same time because it doesn't have enough energy to do both. Let's go now to the Twin Towers and ask a simple question. Assuming that the top section on the left contains enough potential energy to destroy the rest of the tower, and assuming we dropped both upper sections at the same time, which one would hit the ground first? It would be the second, of course. As it finds no obstacles in its path, the section on the right would quickly accelerate to free fall speed and maintain it all the way to the ground. The The section on the left, instead, needs to use some of its energy to destroy the structure below, so it could never achieve free fall speed. In the case of the Twin Towers, however, both upper sections fell with an acceleration close to free fall speed, as if their path had been practically free from obstacles. It took each tower between 10 and 12 seconds to collapse to the ground, while an absolute freefall time would have been 9.2 seconds. In other words, both upper sections of the towers found enough energy to destroy 80,000 tons of healthy structure below, while accelerating to near freefall speed. This is, as we have said, absolutely impossible by gravity alone. The law of momentum conservation won't allow it.
A building cannot do free fall with a huge steel structural system in place to support it.
The Twin Towers could not have come straight down through the resistance of 80,000 tons of structural steel at the speed of practically free fall. That just would not happen.
If in fact it actually hit and made an impact, it was effectively crushing anything, pushing hard on this core structure below it, the core structure is going to push back equally hard. And that's what's going to cause the top section of the building to slow down.
As energy is drained away from the system to deform those members, it would slow down the descending mass and cause a descent at less than free fall speed.
There is only one way for those buildings to have collapsed at the speed they did.
The buildings fall at a speed which can only occur if the structure has been removed, the vertical structure.
The same Shyam Sunder from NIST has acknowledged that free fall can only be achieved with the absence of a structure below.
Free fall time would be an object that has no structural components below it.
But what could have removed the supporting structure below, since the falling section didn't have any extra energy to do so?
The fact that it's coming down at free fall says all of the energy is being used to just make it go straight down, which means it's coming down through itself and not breaking up the building as it goes. Something else has to be clearing the way.
There is only one known way to allow that kind of acceleration while removing the supporting structure.
A building cannot do free fall without it being blown up. That's the only way it could come down at free fall.
The only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses is by having pre-engineered, precisely timed, and precisely placed explosives. In other words, controlled demolition.
In March of 2004, I went with my brother on a protest march commemorating the first anniversary of our invasion of Iraq. And at that time, my brother told me that there were people who had suspicions that the United States government or people within the government had been responsible for the 9/11 attacks. And when my brother told me this, I immediately felt such a sense of revulsion and distaste. It was as if he had exposed himself to me. And I just felt that it was completely beyond the bounds of decency and good taste for him to have said something like that. And so I changed the subject. I did not ask any questions about it. I just didn't want to hear about it. In May of 2006, my husband asked me to read a book review of two of Professor David Ray Griffin's books about 9/11. And by this time, I had seen Michael Moore's movie, Fahrenheit 9/11, and I guess I had been softened up to taking in new information. So I read this book review and thought, oh my gosh, there is a lot here that I haven't known and I need to find out more about. So about a week later, after I had read that book review, I went online and I read a lengthy article by Dr. Griffin. I think it was called Why the Official Account of 9/11 Cannot Be True. And it was very well documented, very highly footnoted, lengthy article, very precise and specific and very well backed up. And I got to the end of the article and I sat there. I was in my office at the time. I sat there and I felt my stomach churning. I thought maybe I was going to be sick. And I leaped out of my chair and ran out the door and took a long walk around the block, around several blocks. and just broke down. I understand now that what was happening was my worldview about my government being in some way my protector, almost like a parent, had been dashed, and it was like being cast out into the wilderness, I think is the closest way to describe that feeling. And I sobbed, felt like the ground had completely disappeared beneath my feet. And I knew at some point during the walk that I knew that I was going to have to become active in educating other people about this, that for me to retain any sense of integrity, I was going to have to take some action. I couldn't just let something like this go.
We are experiencing a public reaction to our quest for the truth. What we experience almost universally is marginalization. We're told, well, you don't represent the mainstream, you're a bit kooky, we're going to scapegoat you, we're going to dismiss you.
Psychological terms can be used to hurt people as well as to help people. And we can marginalize people. We can say that they're nuts if they believe something that the majority of us do not believe. This has been happening with people who've been learning about 9/11 and are trying to do something about it. We get called things like conspiracy theorists. It can be a very difficult thing to be called. People call your sanity into question. They call your common sense into question. They call your judgment into question. You may be much better versed on a subject than they are, but if their views are in line with the majority opinion, they feel that they have grounds to judge you and to marginalize you. And as a society, it's not just person to person that we marginalize people. Our media will marginalize people. The government will marginalize people for having unpopular views. And so this is something that people who are looking at 9/11 are very much up against.
Another thing that happens is that we human beings tend to have a need for closure. And simply not knowing is uncomfortable. We're taught that, we're supposed to know, and we don't want to appear stupid, and we want to have an opinion for everything. And so when there's this societal pressure to not only have an opinion, but to reach closure about something, and then once we have come to our opinion, whatever that is, it can be very difficult to challenge it. And then something that goes on with people is this phenomenon of scapegoating. And scapegoating goes back to the ritual back in the Old Testament when the rabbis would recite the sins of the people over in the heads of goats and then send them out to the desert, where presumably they would be attacked or killed or whatever. But it was a ritualistic way of transferring the guilt or the blame of the people onto these goats, who are then called, of course, scapegoats. And when something bad happens, or something, especially something that's just terrible or preposterous or very, very evil, there's an immediate need to find out who did it, find fault, adjudicate the blame, and then, punish the transgressor. And so what happened right after 9/11 is that this is our country, and even though most of us, of course, are not New Yorkers, we took it personally. This is, something that happened to us. It wasn't just something that happened to the 3,000 people who died. This is something that happened to me and to my country, and people identify with that. And so there's this sense of fear, and oh my God, it could have happened here. And, I remember people in, San Francisco and even Kansas were afraid that they might be bombed, in the next couple of weeks. There was this idea that America's under attack and we've got to do something. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to identify the enemy and punish them or fight against them or do something about it. And so there was a scapegoating of Osama bin Laden first, and Arabs and terrorists, and later, and then we got into this whole thing on the war on terrorism. And so once this connection with an identified scapegoat has been made, and he becomes a channel for our, fear and anger and even fury and hostility, then that becomes difficult to dislodge, and people become comfortable in knowing that, we have found the enemy, we have found the problem, and we are doing something about it.
We start to ask questions, and we hear worse rumor. The government, our own government, may be involved. And we start to be disoriented. We don't know what to think about it. It's like having hot and cold at the same time. Something cannot be hot and cold at the same time. It cannot be Al-Qaeda did it, the American government did it, the airplane made the building collapse, they were explosive. It makes us very, very uncomfortable. And we go back to, every time we hear someone use like that, we go back in the state of shock. It's easier to just go in front of the television, have barbecues, have friends over, have parties, and forget about this whole mess. However, doing that doesn't help really, because our body, our minds know something is going on. And when we deny it, we push something down and it starts to gnaw on our bones, on our organs. Pretty soon we will experience aches and pains. It is believed that 96% of the aches and pains and physical trauma we experience, or even catastrophic illnesses, stem from a trauma that has not been dealt with. So it is very important to deal with a trauma in the best possible way. One of the ways to deal with a trauma is to find the answers.
A lot of people have been wondering why there has been this massive level of denial of people around the incidents surrounding 9/11. And I think there are several reasons for this. One is that we tend to be creatures of habit, and beliefs are habits, just like, eating, drinking, or sleeping. And we tend to believe and then become attached to and even identify with our personal beliefs, and then we'll defend them if they're challenged in any way. There's a wonderful quotation from the American humorist Will Durant, where he once said that it's not what we know that gets us in trouble, it's what we think we know that ain't so. One of our most cherished beliefs is the belief in American goodness. We've been taught since the time we were little kids that America is the leader of the free world, that this is the land of the free and the home of the brave. We wave the flag. And I remember, when growing up watching Superman, at the end of every episode, they would talk about the fight for truth, justice, and the American way. This is something that all of us is very close to in our hearts.
Metropolitan newspaper fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
So when any information comes up that might challenge this belief in American goodness, a lot of people experience this phenomenon of cognitive dissonance and simply cannot deal with it and tend to either deny it or push it away. And for some people, they just do not even want to go there, just because it's too uncomfortable.
We face a lot of difficulty looking at 9/11 objectively. We've all been raised to believe that we're in the greatest country that ever existed, that this couldn't happen here. Our founding fathers did not make the same mistakes. They were perhaps excellent psychologists. They knew human nature. They knew that man was capable of great harm, great evil. They also knew man had great good. They knew that they could create a system based upon values: liberty, democracy, freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. They never made the mistake of trusting individuals or individual systems. They knew, with a healthy skepticism, that people and power would always seek to undermine democracy.
9/11 truth challenges some of our most fundamental beliefs about our government and about our country. We are indoctrinated from an early age to believe that America is good and that we are exceptional. We are the shining beacon in the darkness, a voice for freedom and justice. This patriotic indoctrination is carried out by schools, the military, churches, the media, and other institutions. It's repeatedly hammered home throughout our lives, over and over and over again. No wonder Americans go into denial at the suggestion that our government committed a crime against its own people. Many people respond to these truths in a very deep way. Some have a visceral reaction like they've been punched in the stomach. To begin to accept the possibility that the government was involved is like opening Pandora's box. If you open the lid and peek in a little bit, it's going to challenge some of your fundamental beliefs about the world.
Some people might think that if you believe in 9/11 truth or question the official story, that it means you can't love your country, or that we would feel bad about our country. Our country does have phenomenal ideals those ideals transcend any government or individuals. Those ideals the founders set up so for us to practice and to fight for. Our system was never designed to provide a free ride for us to loaf and not continue to safeguard liberty and freedom. But the ideals of our country are great, and they are still possible for us. And we should continue to fight for those. 9/11 is central to marshaling the public will to move in a direction that it doesn't want to go, to become a different kind of country, not the country that we grew up in, but a foreign country that with foreign values of torture, illegal wars, threats to our emotions, threats to our sense of safety. This is terrorism. It's terrorism by our government. These things should not be tolerated. Unless we want to tolerate the being led in a direction on false information, then we need to be closer to the truth.
I thought that it was a matter of real concern that planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here, because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. And we're looking at that very carefully.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, the ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to the National News Services, AP and UPI?
Well, again, I think we're getting into the kind of detail, Mr. Chairman, that I'd prefer to handle in executive session.
The media seems to function as the prime enabler of the 9/11 events. That you can almost see the media as a kind of a national mind or a global mind. That it's hard to think outside of what we see on television and the newspapers. And if they're presenting repeatedly one version, they are very convincing. And so the media is part of the problem. And if we knew the media better, we would have known this before 9/11. So when the media told us who it was and didn't question, we would have questioned the media. But it's another part of our system that we have not faced, is that our media really does not serve the people the way that we think it does. It does serve government, it serves business interests, and it is blocked out like a mine guard against the 9/11 truth, the truth of what happened. So if we're waiting for people in the media to come forward, it's probably not going to be happening. The Catholic Church has had a terrible crisis with priests that abused young children sexually. And it was hard for anyone to believe that this could happen. It was hard for the priests, I'm sure, who knew, So when we ask, well, wouldn't somebody have come forward? I don't know that there were any or many priests that came forward and confronted the Catholic Church on the sexual abuse. These were good men. Many good men had to have known and stayed silent and allowed this to go on, allowed it to be covered up. To paraphrase Upton Sinclair, it's hard to get a man to understand something that his livelihood depends on him not understanding. Likewise, it's hard to get a man to disbelieve something that his livelihood depends on him believing. And so we have multiple betrayals in this situation with people with power, with knowledge, some of whom like to kid themselves, some of them protect themselves from the knowledge. Most of them are scared. And so we need to know that the people that are approached about 9/11 truth are scared too. They may get angry, but this is very disturbing. One of the great flaws that the Greeks told us about and warned us was excessive pride. Thinking that we're above such things, that it could happen in other countries, but it couldn't happen here, that's a lack of humility, and that's excessive pride. And so not being able to see our dark side or our weaknesses is the most dangerous thing. When we can see them, we can deal with them. We can interpret. And that's a strength. The woman that doesn't know that her husband has had affairs before or doesn't know that he's abusive is worse off for not having known, for being in denial. Knowing the truth is empowering, and we can cope with that. We've coped with the Great Depression, we've coped with World War II, we've coped with a great number of things, and it would get our country back on track in the values that we believe in. And there wouldn't be anything stopping us from being the kind of country that we believe we are.
The observation that pride is one of the basic human flaws is absolutely correct. This is especially true for Americans because we, for a long time, looked at other nations and say, oh, they're in such bad shape. But luckily, we don't have those problems. We don't have leaders who would do those things that were done in the Soviet Union, or done in Germany, or done in Japan, and on down the list. So this is a type of pride. A feature of American history that makes us particularly liable to this pride is this notion that's called exceptionalism, that America is the exceptional nation. And that began from the beginning. As this country was formed, the people would say, well, there was so much evil in the European countries, so much cheating, so much lying, so much using the people for the ruler's purposes, but not in America. We have leaders that are free from those sins. So I think this has made 9/11 particularly difficult for Americans. We find that the Europeans in the 9/11 movement don't have such a problem. We found that the Japanese don't have a problem. They do not believe the United States is the exceptional nation in this sense, that we are somehow, our leaders are above the sins that affect other leaders. Now, most people are very convinced that we're going the wrong direction. The polls show that. We have a terrible debt. We didn't move out of it the way that we should have because the people who were in charge did not have that as the primary priority, that is, to help the ordinary people. We also see that the Constitution has been gutted. We're doing many things that prior to 9/11 were inconceivable, that we would just accuse someone of a crime and put them in prison indefinitely without a trial. And this has happened to many people, including many Americans. We have this, what's called extraordinary rendition, where people have been taken out of the United States or some other country and taken to a third country where they will be tortured. We know there has been an enormous amount of torture. No one has been brought to trial for that. So we are now, as many commentators are saying, we are now living in a post-legal society. We're living in an unlawful society where is it lawful? That question no longer counts. What happened with the killing of bin Laden? Most commentators say it was murder. No one will be punished for that. In fact, the president's poll ratings will go up, have gone up. So there are many things that people would say in the last 10 years, this country has gone way downhill, not only economically and militarily, but legally, spiritually. Our own self-respect is being undermined, is being destroyed by the things that the government is doing, and nobody is held accountable. We have these two wars, both of them illegal, both of them based on lies, both of them killing. We don't have exact figures, but they're in the millions of people. Countries that had no attack plan for us, everyone agrees now. Afghanistan was not planning to attack America. Iraq was not going to attack America. And yet we have killed millions of the people. How can we have any self-respect if this continues? So that's the approach I would take. Try to help people make the connection between the ruin of our nation with 9/11.
And the point is that the story we are telling is painful. Because once you've seen 7 going down, you get a sensation that there's something wrong here, and your immediate reaction is that maybe I shouldn't look into this, because this may lead me to places where I do not want to go. Fact is that we do not want to be lied to, and we do not want to lie ourselves, both. So if you realize that the people who we have selected have lied to us to an extent that is so beyond imagination to ordinary people, is very painful, actually. But as a consequence, since we have something that we're not supposed to talk about, is downright destructive to our Western civilization. You can blow up any good company by either start to discussing politics, religion, or 9/11. Mm-hmm. Yeah, then it's not fun anymore, because usually people divide on this subject. And there's something here we cannot talk about. That means the language is deteriorating. And this is what you've seen observed with Western culture in the last 12 years, in my least. We're ending up like Eastern Europe was 20 years ago, gray and gray and gray. Absolutely nothing's happening. Because if you have the secret police sitting next to you in the bus, there are something you do not talk about. Which means that everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows that we should not talk about this, and particularly in the mainstream media. As a consequence, it's true, marriages are breaking up, families are breaking up, parents are not talking with their children, children are not talking with their parents because of this. So you end up with a society which is soaked with fear and lies. We accept the lies. We downright lies for going into the war in Afghanistan, and Denmark has been involved in total of 7 wars in 2001. So we have a society of lies and fear, and all power is based on fear. And all wars are based on deception, and wars is the most profitable business of all.
Until we completely destroy the government's official myth and get some real truth told out there, all the evils that have happened since 9/11 are going to continue. The corporate wars of aggression, the taking away of our constitutional rights, the destruction of this country.
If we are part of a collective, part of a nation, then we will also have a dysfunctional nation if we don't know the truth. We can't have a functional nation if we're operating on lies.
I've come across a song by a performer named Weird Al Yankovic, which sort of sums up what I was feeling, what I've heard other people talk about when they had to deal with the 9/11 information. And the lyrics go, everything you know is wrong, black is white, up is down, and short is long, and everything you thought was so important doesn't matter. That was what it was like. It was like a very sudden shift in my priorities and what I thought I needed to be doing with my life, in just how I regarded the entire world and how I regarded the people in it. If we can think of our worldview as being sort of our mental and emotional home, on the day that I learned that 9/11 was probably an inside job, it was the day I lost that home and was sort of cast out into the wilderness, an extremely uncomfortable feeling. And when I've tried to talk with people in the past few years about 9/11, I see that sort of discomfort come up with them many times, where to the point where they will, I think all of us will do just about anything to defend our homes, to defend our families. And so I see that with people, and I saw that with myself when my brother tried to talk with me about it, of don't mess with me, don't mess with my home, don't mess with my comfort with how things are. So that was very difficult.
When 9/11 happened, a lot of things were taken away. Lives were lost, fears were instilled, hatreds were stirred up. Those are some of the most intimate parts of one's psyche, what makes one human. More was taken away from us than those lives, as tragic as they were. Our right to form objective opinions, our right to have our own feelings about objective reality was taken away. We were psychologically abused on September 11th, and since. The psychological abuse has continued. We need to stop the psychological abuse and manipulation of the American people. If we don't, then we are participating in it. None of us were trained to look at the possibility that the government could do this. There was no class in graduate school about government operations as such. We were never taught to entertain the possibility, even though we now know these things have been going on for a very long time. 9/11 and facing the truth about it is important to the soul of America. And the values that have come from the official story corrupt us emotionally, mentally and spiritually. We don't deserve to be corrupted.
Later on, as I researched and integrated more of the information, I also had to come to terms with the very uncomfortable feeling of being a dupe, of being a sucker, of believing what the government told me without checking it out for myself first. I consider myself to be a well-educated, mature adult, and to realize that I had just absorbed the government's story lock, stock, and barrel without really questioning it. It was very humbling. It was not fun. It really made me question my own intelligence and my own integrity for having jumped so quickly on the bandwagon in a way that was very harmful and racist towards people in the Middle East. So I spent actually a very lonely summer with every night insomnia, nightmares, knowing that I wanted to become active in exposing this information, and feeling like if I did so, the government or people within the government might hunt me down and kill me. I mean, just general sense of paranoia about having this information and doing something with it. And so it was a very long, very difficult summer for me. But during that summer, I also spent a huge amount of time reading everything I could get my hands on about 9/11 and becoming more and more sure that the official account was a complete lie and that something needed to be done about it.
In this case, the people that we rely on to gather the evidence aren't. It's sort of like calling the police and the police won't investigate. And then you find out, oh, one of the police officers did it and is covering it up.
We know we've been lied to about 9/11. We don't know for sure who did it. We don't know exactly how they did everything. And that's why we need a new investigation to find out. Regardless of what anyone thinks about how it happened or who caused it, there's no question that the Bush administration took advantage of that to deceive the Congress and the American people into unnecessary and illegal wars of aggression, into cramming down our throats the Patriot Act and the Military Commissions Act. And these evils are going on now, even under a different administration. And so it's obvious that whichever party is in power, the American people absolutely need the truth of 9/11.
If we don't want greater deceptions, if we don't want more war based on these deceptions, then we need to know the truth. And the way to find the truth is an investigation and then holding those responsible legally accountable.
We need an impartial, scientific, and legal investigation, as required by law, of any crime scene. And we should not be treating 9/11 as an excuse to go to war, but rather as a criminal act for which we have yet to do the forensic analysis, the scientific analysis, all the disciplines working together. I know that's what we do in our police department in my hometown. That's what we expect in our state government, law enforcement. We expect at the international level, international law. I think that by putting science together with the law, we will have a psychological healing around the impossible cognition that has been produced on that day.
Never forget that this country is based on only one thing: due process of law. And that just has stayed with me ever since. And the other day, when they got rid of habeas corpus, which took some doing, but it was done after 700 years, we lost it. And I kept thinking of my grandfather, and I could hear his voice in my head: due process of law. Without that, we are nothing.
The cycle we're going through right now is the same cycle as victims of domestic violence are going through. We feel helpless. We feel hopeless. We need answers. We need to get out of this control zone that we are in. And I think it's of utmost importance to have a thorough investigation by a neutral professional to give a serious answer, both from the scientific and the legal point of view.
I think at first glance, the truth about 9/11 can be re-traumatizing, and people are afraid to look at it. But if handled with empathy and with compassion, I think the truth about 9/11 allows us to connect with people. It empowers us as survivors of this in going through or taking actions about it. It can help us overcome our own feelings of helplessness and loss of control about what is going on with our government. It really can help set us free. People have lived through trauma and traumatic events throughout history, and they will continue to do that. I think the resiliency of the human spirit in overcoming tragedy cannot be overestimated.
I want to give people a sense of hope. Eventually, I was able to realize that 9/11 presents an opportunity for us to find our sense of integrity again, to find our sense of courage, our sense of optimism, that now that we know a little bit more about how things actually work, how wars are actually created by governments, how governments get people to go to war, we have an opportunity now, a wonderful opportunity, which fills me with great joy, to do something about it, to find a way to stop this from occurring again.
There will always be people who cannot accept the truths of 9/11, even if the perpetrators publicly confessed. But for most people, the truth can be accessed. The 9/11 Truth Movement is changing our country one person at a time.
One of the leaders of the 9/11 Truth Movement has said something that I sort of hold close to my heart. It kind of keeps me going when things get rough. There is no greater joy than coming together with people of conscience and standing up together for what's right.
Psychology professionals are concerned about the silence in America. The silence about what happened on September 11th, 2001. Secrets make us sick, they tell us. Secrets make us psychologically unhealthy. Whether held in silence within us as individuals or held in silence by an entire nation. These psychologists say that we're ignoring the elephant in the room. Now, what they mean is, in our national living room, we are ignoring the abundance of hard facts that prove we have not been told the truth about what happened on September 11th. Actually, professionals from many different fields decry our media for parroting their government sources. Rather than asking hard questions, rather than investigating official claims and honestly reporting their independent findings. Because of this parroting by the media, we the people have readily accepted the story we've been told about what happened on that horrific day. That horrific day. A day that drastically changed our world. We have learned that if we label those who question our government's account of that tragedy as conspiracy theorists, we can quickly silence honest discussion of what really happened on 9/11. Yet if we listen closely to their questions, instead of silencing or ignoring them, we notice that a number of serious researchers are bringing hard scientific evidence to our attention. If we study this evidence, we can easily see that truth has been demolished in our country. That's why this film has been titled Demolition of Truth. To be healthy as a nation, we must be willing to open our eyes and our hearts. We must find the courage not only to ask the difficult questions, but to listen to what may be challenging answers. Since 9/11, thousands of soldiers and millions of innocent civilians have been killed. The war on terror keeps escalating with no end in sight. Because of 9/11, precious civil liberties have been lost in the U.S. and around the globe. We Americans can be subject to searches and seizures without a warrant. We can be detained or imprisoned indefinitely without charge, without evidence, without a lawyer, without a trial. The psychology professionals in this film tell us that looking at the truth of 9/11 isn't easy. 9/11 was traumatic, and looking anew at 9/11 is tough and even scary. But we are resilient. If we acknowledge our fear and then decide not to let that fear control us, we can break the silence and find healing in the truth, not only for ourselves, but for our country and for the world.